It was very clear. The first thing that had to be attacked was the structure. And here we are in a building that's been around since the mid-1800s. And it's built on pilings that sit in silt. And it's constructed of brick walls and beams that are not tied to each other. The kind of thing just kind of sits. And all that's terrific, unless you have an earthquake. And it turns out Boston's in the same zone as San Francisco. We haven't had one in a long time, but when it comes, it's going to be, it'll look a little like Haiti around here.
Boston is a landfill city, and as the engineers said, man-made land operates like jello when you shake it. But it was this combination of landfill and old structures. And so the building department came out with a new building code. Every old structure had to be totally rebuilt when you did renovation beyond a certain point. There was a huge outcry. I mean, come on, we had these buildings for 200 years. They're not going to fall over. I remember going to a meeting and hearing some of your trustees worry about the building falling down on children. Here you have a museum where you're putting kids in, and now we've discovered we're in an earthquake zone. That, I think, got everybody's attention in a really interesting way.
And so the code says, if you're going to renovate one of these buildings, there are things you have to do. And you kind of have to make a decision at the beginning that says, okay, we can't have the building collapse, but are we going to go to the level that the building will survive it perfectly, or will the building get wrecked but not collapse and kill people? And so that was the threshold decision, and the decision was we couldn't do it perfectly. We just had to go to the level that we wouldn't kill anybody.
Because the old warehouse everybody loved, when you walk in the doors and you imagine it being cleaned, you had these giant heavy timbers bigger than a body. So this place was so warm and so wonderful as a giant, not a Lincoln log set, but pretty close to it. It felt good. With brick walls, it felt like a friendly place to be in. And, you know, if the structural code people had its way, you would have lost the character of the building. We had a brilliant engineer working with us, a guy named Lynn Brown. Well, Lynn came up with an interesting idea. He said, you know, this building doesn't work together. If this brick wall goes that way and this brick wall goes that way, the floor comes down. And so he said, what we need to do is have the brick walls go the same way each time. And so the floors stayed in place. On the top of all the floors, we put two pieces of plywood, one running this way and one running that way. And that created what was called a diaphragm, like a piece of paper that doesn't resist lateral. You could punch it this way, but you can't resist this way. And then a very lightweight concrete cement slab was poured, because the floor might be carpet, it might be tile, it might be anything that you would walk on. The beauty was the ceiling, not the floor. And that was the way we solved it.
Well, there was a little detail of tying the concrete into the walls. And that turned out to be a solution of an anchor bolt drilled into the wall. The anchor bolts were about $2 a piece, and the specification was that they be every foot. Well, there are 6 bays and 6 floors. And it turned out that there were a zillion anchor bolts, and that there would be guys there with hammer drills for about a year, you know, drilling holes and driving these things. And you just go, there's got to be another way. And it turned out that the solution was as old as construction. It was to take some rods and run them from one end of the building to the other. And we had these big stars cast, and you'd tie up the tension rod. And then to get rid of the racking problem, plywood nailed to the floor did the job. And so there was, by now we had essentially beaten the budget. And we had an entire building that functioned.
And that was the way we solved it. It was very, very interesting, very, very economical, actually a very elegant kind of solution. And that opened the door for the building to be used because we were really terrified of the kind of unknown structural costs we might get into. You could spend all the money on structure and have nothing to show for the building. And so this solution really put that to bed.